This book just keeps confusing me so much. So I'm really sorry if my talks are just all over the place. But again, we let the wind of the Teisho rustle whatever leaves it rustles and let it go. Should we do a quick little shake? Thank you. Man, that feels strangely good. So we kind of went through the intro of this book, Training in Compassion by Norman Fisher. And so now chapter 1 is called Resolve to Begin. So we're all pretty seasoned sitters here. And I don't know about you, but I still have to resolve to begin every day. And that's not a humble brag, that's like a struggle brag. So, yeah, continuous spiritual practice. I don't care if it's Zen or Tibetan Buddhism or Catholicism or Judaism or secular science person, to really stick with anything, particularly any kind of spiritual path. You kind of have to resolve to begin constantly, constantly be knocked off. Look at Job, right? Job was a Jew, right? Is that how it went? Yeah. God, he had to resolve to renew his faith all the time. He was confident in it, but I can just imagine losing everything, being punished over and over again. You work so hard just to lose it all. You work so hard on sitting in these koans, and they just don't make any sense, and you're more confused than you were before, and they're not doing anything for your life. God forsakes you, whatever it is. You do the best at your job, and your boss fires you. You have to resolve to begin. That's that beginner's mind that Suzuki Roshi talks about, I guess. So he says, the difference between just suffering and training with this suffering has to do with how you view it, with your sense of resolve and personal responsibility. Yeah, so that resolving to begin is taking responsibility for your path, for your practice, and for your own suffering. At this moment, I'm reminded of a doksan I had with Tenshin Roshi up at Yokoji Monastery over a decade ago by now. And I said, sometimes I feel like the practice has failed me. And he says, the practice doesn't fail you, you fail. Which at the time didn't feel good. And it's probably not the best way to share that teaching. And now I'm wondering if it was Tenshin Roshi or someone else. Ugh, someone I saw one-on-one. Don't quote me. Tenshin's an amazing teacher. But yeah, I think that, whoever it was, their confidence in saying that, there was no head, I didn't even finish the sentence. And they were like, no, it's up to you. This practice isn't like here to give you anything. It's here for you to grab a hold of and make the most of. Yeah. Show you the door you got to walk through, all that kind of stuff. Taking responsibility for your suffering now that it has happened, uh, owning it as the stuff of your present life, rather than seeing it as a tragedy that shouldn't have happened, or bemoaning your sad fate. Recognize instead that regardless of what has happened or why, this is your life and you are the only one equipped to deal with it. I don't know why, for some reason that just really spoke to me as I was reading through that if I get fired, even though I was the perfect employee, thinking about how awful the boss is or how terrible the culture is doesn't really do anything for anyone. But instead saying, I got fucked, sorry, I got mistreated, that's what's going on, I have a wound, so let me tend to that wound. And of course, if your boss or someone is like abusive and like really inappropriate, we have to take action to address that for sure. We go to HR, we report something. If someone harms us, we can go to the police, we can make a petition so that they don't harm others, for sure. But as far as how to work with it for myself, um, God, I've spent so much time trying to heal by blaming and trying to make sense of how someone has wronged me instead of just realizing this is what I got. Regardless of how in the wrong they are, how well I did, how well I treated them, um, to be able to kind of drop that story and just deal with the suffering, just deal with the feeling, I think makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot more accessible. Makes me feel like, oh, I can deal with that. Because that's the thing, when someone's wronged me, when someone's been, anyway, yeah, take responsibility, not blaming the victim, but even as a victim, taking responsibility for taking care of this suffering, really seeing what it is. That reminds me of the koan where Zwigen calls Master. Every morning Zwigen would wake up and say, Master, and he himself would answer, yes. And then he would say, Master, and then he would answer, yes. And then he would say, awaken, awaken. And then he would say, yes, yes. And then he would say, do not be deceived by others. And then he would say, no, no. So what is this master? Another teacher of mine said when he was working on this koan, there was this little tassel hanging from the altar cloth. Sometimes, I guess we don't. On some of our cloths, we have these little tassels. It's kind of a Japanese thing, I guess. Or it's an everywhere thing, tassels, I guess. And he said when he was sitting with this koan, um, he would see that little tassel dangling in the wind and it would be calling to him, Master, Master. Do not be deceived by others. So I guess in the context of this book, um, yeah, worrying about what others are doing, comparing myself, blaming others, worrying about others' reactions to things. Um, I guess there's a time and a place for that. Could be helpful in some ways, but to really get to the heart of what I'm dealing with, um, you are the master. Only you can really take care of that. Let's see. This was kind of helpful. The point is, you begin, and of course, we're always beginning. Resolve to begin. You begin by marking a pause in your life, a time when you say to yourself, the old path is no good anymore. I've come to the end of it. I need to take the time now to review my life so that I can find the motivation to go ahead differently. I'm sure we're all very familiar with that. And yet it's so hard. It's so easy to say, and yet we have our patterns and we have stuck places, stuck doing the same thing. And so I made a note of that koan where Joshu makes his presentation, let's say, of enlightenment, true nature, awakening. He makes his presentation by putting his shoes on his head and walking out the door. And in the koan, there's a lot to see there, but for now, just for this talk, we can say it's a really nice expression of flipping things upside down, trying something new, coming from a place of not knowing. I'm a this kind of person. That person is a that kind of person. That shouldn't have happened to me because of blah, blah, blah. It should be better this way. All these things that we know and that we think are true and that we come with this knowing attitude. Wear your shoes on your head. Try a different path. Flip things upside down. Be open to seeing things a new way. The old path is no good anymore. I have come to the end of it. I love that. Of course, it's not true. No path ends. Um, but I don't know. It's just kind of motivating. It's a motivating idea for me. Done with that. Yeah. So we're taking responsibility. I mean, that's basically what sesshin is, right? I'm just preaching to the choir here. We're all doing it. Coming to sesshin, continuous practice, being of service to others, uh, all these different ways that we take a pause and take responsibility for our own suffering. I've talked to all of you. We all know each other somewhat well. All of us are very much in tune with that. So sorry for being redundant, but I hope it offers something. So then I guess I just wanted to say, let's see. He says one of the ways to work, get started, to resolve to begin, is to follow the set of traditional reflections given in Tibetan and Mahayana Buddhism. And there's 4 key points to think about. If you really take these 4 points seriously, if you think about them long enough and hard enough to see how true they really are, it will change your outlook on life. Well, that sounds nice. Some of this sounds a little Tony Robbins-ish every now and then. I can't lie. We love you, Norman. We love you. This book is great. You're great. So these 4 key points, I know I've heard some of you talk about. I'm sure we all know them, some of us very, very well. So this is all just repetition. But if there's one thing I've learned from Donald Trump, repetition works. This is the best practice. The best practice. No world has ever seen a practice like this before. It's the best practice. Everyone agrees this is the best practice. Shoyu's hiding his face in shame. So, yeah, just allow me to have us repeat what we already know. So the first of these 4 key reflections, the rarity and preciousness of human life. So I'm kind of stuck on this rarity. There's a lot of that talk in Buddhism. The rare opportunity of human form. And I don't really get that. Rare, not rare, I don't know. If you think about how many billions and trillions of species and beings, then like, yeah, I guess it's rare to be human. But if you think there's 7 billion of us and we've been around for tens of thousands of years, it doesn't seem that rare. I don't know, that's a koan for me. The rarity of life and the preciousness. I have nothing to say. Do you see your life as precious? That's the koan. Again, these 4 reflection points, just like the precepts, I don't really practice with them as like truths or rules. I practice them as questions, as offerings. Do I see my life as rare? Do I see my life as precious? Precious, fragile, fleeting, valuable. So yeah, and that's what he says, to work with these 4 reflections continuously, to sit with them, to investigate them, to doubt them, to hate them, to love them, to be grateful for them, to want to shoot them in the face, all of it. And the second reflection is the absolute inevitability of death. Reflect on that. Who is it that's dying? What does it mean to go beyond life and death? Can the transition between life and death be seamless? And of course, we know that this little self, this little body, will stop working. And yeah, I think we all know what that feels like, to really rock that, to really see that inevitability. This little self will be gone. And even now, just saying that, even though it's the most obvious thing, just saying that with my hara Just right now, it made all my problems just seem that much smaller, less hefty. It's interesting. The absolute inevitability of death. Again, not a rule, not a truth. There's no one to be born or die. The third reflection is the awesome and indelible power of our actions. In Buddhism, this is called karma. Karma simply means that each of our actions produces a result. Yeah, even, yeah, the tiniest little thing. He says later on, I don't want to read the whole thing, but he basically says, we think of the president as powerful, we think of the spiritual leader as powerful, we think of the pop star as powerful, we think of Tony Robbins as powerful, famous people, people with influence. They're the ones who are making change in the world. And in one way, I guess that's true. Martin Luther King left a, I don't know, bigger footprint than I will. That's true. Um, but that's very measuring. It's very dualistic. It's very, um, I don't know, yeah, separate. And so to really see that every little thing we do, this is the law of karma, every little thing we do ripples out 100%. And so if I'm stuck on the couch wallowing and ruminating, um, that's going to have a different ripple than if I go say hi to my neighbor and ask them how they're doing, which would have a different effect than if I go drown my sorrows at the bar. And the point is not to evaluate which is best, which is better, but just to keep that constant awareness that everything I do ripples out, changes the world indelibly, unchangeably, undeniably, the awesome and indelible power of our actions. And then the last reflection, the inescapability of suffering, or dukkha, the first noble truth. Yeah, inescapable. I often think whenever I'm regretting or grieving or missing, and I say, man, if only I did it differently. Man, if only I had said blah, blah, blah. If only I had yada, yada. And really, the only second part to that sentence is we'd still be suffering. Sure, it'd be different, and the ripples of our actions are awesome and indelible, and yet uh, suffering, dukkha. And I shared the other day my new favorite translation of dukkha, not going my way, or not going our way, since it's all of ours. We share this dukkha. And of course, in line with what I'm saying, this isn't a truth either. This isn't a hard and fast truth or rule. The third noble truth. We can penetrate this dukkha. We don't have to be slave to it. So how can something be inescapable and escapable? Our fourth Bodhisattva vow that we're about to chant, we changed it, and now it says, the Buddha way is unsurpassable, we vow to practice. But I think another English translation that was originally the ZCLA translation, the Buddha way is unattainable, I vow to attain it. I have nothing else to say. Let that um, let that support you. Let these truth, non-truth, rule, non-rules support you, help you, motivate you um, to keep on coming back and to take responsibility for our suffering and thus, of course, the suffering of others.